Welcome to another episode of the Commute to Me podcast, a conversational podcast exploring the stories, insights, and strategies behind learning-centric communities. Our mission is to inspire listeners by highlighting individuals who are shaping the future of how people come together to learn, grow, and thrive. I'm thrilled to welcome Shahamat Chowdhury, founder of Salam Consulting, a Virginia-based coaching and consulting firm that's dedicated to empowering individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential. With a background in business management and organizational development, Shahamat has extensive experience in recruiting, career coaching, performance management, and product management. 3 years ago, Shahamat began offering pro bono career coaching to individuals seeking guidance in their professional journeys. Recognizing the need for broader impact, he established Salam Consulting to provide coaching and consulting services to professionals from all backgrounds. Shahamat, it's awesome to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Thanks, Marlon. It's such a pleasure. I'm doing great. It's great to see you. Great to chat with you. Looking really excited to just have this conversation.
Fantastic. It's awesome to have you on. One of the things that when I first met you online, we actually haven't met in person, as is the case with many of the folks that I bring on the podcast. But one of the things that really resonated with me was your personal story and the story of how you established Salam Consulting, the inspiration behind the name even. So I would love for you to share with our guests what that journey was and that inspiration.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And again, such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. From a background perspective, Salam, the name, comes from my grandfather, who was born and raised in Bangladesh, Salam Kabir. He had a ton of different business ventures, but the one thing that was core to him was giving back to the community. That was always his big thing, whether it was in the masjid, whether it was, in his community space, whether it was like some organizational development. He was always constantly looking to see how he could support other people. So very similarly, I am someone who was very driven from an early age. I would make it big in the corporate ladder. Like, I wasn't someone who was looking into entrepreneurship at any point. I wasn't someone who was like, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer. I told my parents from a very young age, I just want to influence and I want to bring change to community, right? But not from a nonprofit perspective. It was more so like just drive change in general and how I can make my communities better. And so Salam really came around. The cool part is I was interviewing for a high-level product manager role, and I studied for weeks. It was actually a couple weeks before I ended up going to Umrah for the first time with my family. I was studying for weeks, and I was like, this is it. This is the goal. I'm going to do it. I studied, and I didn't get the role. And that was when I had to take a step back, and I was like, I was so absolved with myself and figuring out like what was best for me, what was this. And I realized right after that, I could either mope about this or take all this energy where I don't feel like I've achieved something and I can create something. My wife and I, we sat down for like 20 minutes. We're like, we're going to create this coaching consulting firm and call it Salam. We're going to honor your grandfather, make this a big thing. We give people the ability to prep interviews, write resumes, and just be heard and have coaching opportunities, community building. And so this was back in August of 2024 when we first launched Salam. I made that LinkedIn post. The big goal a lot of people don't know is it all stems from failure. You'll hear that from a ton of founders and people developing things. Failure, right? They didn't get success on the first time. There's a ton of different founders, people out there who just didn't make it their first time or went through a really tough, difficult situation. And then they were like, here's the bright idea. I think very similarly, Salam fell in that same type of, dynamic where it was like, okay, something didn't go right and I'm going to make a difference in someone else's life. So 10 years down the road, when someone else is going through a product management interview or trying to get that next promotion, they have Salam in their corner to kind of support them to that need.
I think it's so valuable to use that failure as the catalyst for development. Sometimes in our hyper competitive lifestyles, we tend to lose sight of the fact that failure is one of the key ingredients to success. I wrote a blog post years ago at this point. One of my friends who was going through the career journey and really was kind of struggling to find his match, the perfect place to launch a fulfilling career. His struggles in the job market inspired me to write this blog post. I might actually post it on LinkedIn later on. Failure is, and especially coming from a South Asian background, right? As a Bangladeshi American myself, failure was almost a taboo topic growing up. I did well in school and I enjoyed school and extracurricular activities, and I was an involved student in my K through 12 education, but there was a taboo on failure, which I think had I not been so afraid of failure earlier in my career, or even as a student before I entered the real world, I probably would have been more resilient, capable of making decisions that had some risk embedded in them. in order to be able to seek that reward, right? Not having that culture of being comfortable with failure kind of steered me towards things that were a little bit more safe, which I think hindsight is always 2020, maybe inhibited some of the things that I could have done. So that really resonates with me. What are your thoughts on that, Shahamat, before I continue to the next point?
Yeah, I think I had a very untraditional upbringing. My mom was very supportive on like failure. Like she allowed us to embrace it, which was different than most Desi culture, right? You got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer. My mom had never at any point, she was like, it would be cool if you did these things, but where are your actual passions lie? And she always told us, like, me and my two other brothers, whatever you want to do, go do it, but be the best at it, right? If you're going to do something, be the best at it. I wasn't the best at school. Like I was really smart up until high school. Around me consider me to be a very smart person, but I wasn't flying GPA 4.0. I didn't get into the big schools that I had applied to. I didn't have a hotshot internship out of college, but I always figured out connections, whether I was a sales associate, whether if I was an intern, whether I was like a cashier. I was going to be the best damn cashier in the store. I was going to be the best damn intern in our program. So it wasn't necessarily the fear of failure. It was more, okay, I'm going to be the very best at whatever I do, whether it's video gaming, whether it's playing a sport. Obviously, I didn't get really good at sports, but in general, it was just like, if you're going to determine to do something, you better do 100% of it. And if you can't do it, that's when my mom would be like, okay, this probably isn't for you. Maybe you should take a step back. That's probably where I would only see the concept of failure, but it was always like, take a shot at it first before you try to dive in.
I think those are fundamentally important values that as professionals and as folks influencing those around us, we should always try to strengthen, right? I think part of it too is, if I can just reflect on what you shared, fear of failure is one part of the equation, but the other piece is the pursuit of success. In order to succeed, you have to try different things and be ready to fail and not be the best at certain things to find what you are really good at and what you really enjoy. So tell me a little bit more about Salam Consulting, the way that you've been bringing this community together. I see a lot of your posts on LinkedIn. We're definitely going to be sharing all of your links and information in the show notes as well. But I'd love to understand the initial stage of building this community, how it grew, and where you see yourself headed in the next couple of months first, and then maybe next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that distinction, next couple of months versus years. Like, I don't know where we're going to be. There's always new ideas coming around. I think with Salam, it started when I was in my master's program in the organizational development program at George Mason. We were introduced to a ton of different executive coaches. During one of our classes, we had 6 coaches come in, and these were some hotshot coaches, right? They were making like $25,000 per deal, per package with these folks. And I remember sitting there, and they were all white men and white women. That's all they were. And they were like, yeah, I did 20 years of corporate America, and I did 35 years of leadership. And now I do this on the side just to make 6 figures easily by talking to people. Everyone in my class was like, oh my God, this is so cool. I want to be a coach. And I was probably the only people that was like, I don't want to do this. This seems like an elite group of people. I think it's great that people are able to be in a position where they can charge $25,000 for one person. I don't think at any point that is where I want to go. And I talked about this in another podcast recently where we met with a couple of other individuals, and they were like, hey, where do you find value most? What we find value in Salam is not the amount of dollars we're making, but the amount of people we're supporting. After that initial interaction with an executive coach, I realized there's not a lot of Bengali coaches. There's not a lot of South Asian coaches, at least here in the East Coast. I've heard a ton of great things in the West Coast when it comes to South Asian coaches. But what I wanted to do is like, how many people actually have coaches? I think there's this big misconception of mentors and coaches, but they're entirely two different things. A coach is someone who's aligning you to they'll ask you certain questions and then they'll get you to the answer that you're looking for, versus a mentor is someone who you ask the questions to and they're just like, well, back in my time, this is what I did and this is what I think you should do. The reason why I prefer coaching over mentorship is because you, Farhan, for example, you know the answers to your life. You might not think you know the answers, but at the end of the day, there's someone in your head telling you, hey, this is the best thing to do. But sometimes you're not asking yourself the right questions. And that's why as a coach, it's like, hey, Farhan, what do you think is the best situation here? What do you actually think about the progress you've done on this podcast? Those type of questions that stem you to think, okay, am I actually doing a good job? Am I actually happy in what I'm doing? Right? You can't get that with a mentor. So when we first launched, I was kind of hesitant. I was like, I'm going to charge people $30, like very low amounts. And I remember people were like, what are you doing? You're not going to make a profit this way. See, I come from a place of privilege because I work a 9 to 5, right? I work for a very large bank and they pay me really good money to do things that I want to do. So I think what I'm really satisfied about is that at Salam, I don't have to rely on the amount of money we're bringing in. It's more so like whatever we make at Salam, it's investing back into the community, into the business. A couple weeks ago for Eid, for example, we did a giveaway and we gave a ton of $25 gift cards to coffee shops across our Instagram accounts. We did a pop-up a couple months ago, and that pop-up we started giving out $50 gift cards, right? So we are really big on giving back to the community and giving people the ability to learn and have a good time. And I think with Salam, what we want to do is build community. I think that's the big thing. It's not just the career development. It's not just we'll write your resume or give you a couple career sessions, but the real beauty of it is helping people that genuinely will not be able to get that help unless they empty out their pockets for $500. The biggest success story we have at Salam was this guy at Amaz reached out to me. He's like, hey, we have someone who just got out of prison. They don't know what to do with their career. How can you please help them for free? I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to take money from someone. So we took it pro bono. And I gave the phone call to that person. I was like, let me know what you're looking for. He was like, I really don't know what to do. Can you just do my resume? I was like, okay, I'll do your resume. Here are some companies that are hiring in your area, because he didn't have a car or anything. The next week, he calls me back. He's like, I wanted to thank you so much. I actually landed a job at one of those companies. And now I'm thinking about getting my trucking license. I want to do this with my career. Thank you so much. So this is what we call the ripple effect, where we did a small act of kindness and it went to that individual. That individual for the rest of their life is going to remember that moment. Like, Shahamat helped me find that job, right? He might not remember my name years from now, but he's always going to know in the back of his head who that person was. And that's what we really want at Salam. We want people to be able to connect, like, their aspirations in life. Maybe they meet their future spouse at an event that we're hosting. We just want to be that support system that allows people to go achieve these things without charging them an arm and a leg. I just want people to be able to access these things. The amount of free resume reviews we do, like sometimes people are like, can you please just talk to me for 20 minutes? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Is capacity going to come at us? Yes. And that's when we'll pull in additional resources. But right now in the stage that we are, we've helped over 350 clients. These are people that we've touched and they still text me from time to time, like, hey, this is what I'm going through right now, or hey, that job you helped me land, this is where I'm at right now, or hey, I'm actually thinking about starting my business, or you helped me start my business, and now we're sealing this deal right here. What is your thoughts? And I'm not charging them to text me, right? I've seen a lot of coaches, they're like, hey, for a monthly fee of $50, you can be subscribed to my services. I'm like, no, what? Like, the only time I will charge someone if I have to get on a Zoom call and have a conversation for an hour. But the reason I'm charging them is because I want them to also be invested in their career, right? So that's important. It's not like I'm taking the money from them. It's because if I don't, then there's not that level of accountability to make sure I can give you the highest quality that you're looking for.
I think there's so much to unpack there. You just dropped a lot of gems, man. What resonates with me specifically is the idea of just the community building is organic. It's no strings attached. It's just, let's try to bring those serendipitous inflection points into people's lives. All of us can relate to a time in our past when it just took one person to give us a chance, or one encounter where you were interacting with somebody and one thing led to something else, and then your life changed. It was an inflection point in either your personal or professional life because of an encounter, a meaningful conversation, or a connection that you made with somebody on a very meaningful level, right? And I think when we think of networking and getting together as a group, especially when there's a career element to it, it can be very daunting for a lot of people. I mean, I spend probably 40% of my time trying to find events to go to. Like, that's why I'm broke, is I spend all my money trying to meet other people, right? Part of that too is what I've learned as I've done this is you never know, the person next to you could be the next big thing. The person walking, up the hallway that you say hi to or that you connect with, even briefly, can end up being a tremendous resource for you and a source of insight and a source of inspiration, whatever the case might be. So creating those inflection points that are by nature serendipitous, right? Putting people in the same room where they're able to just hang out, learn from one another, see how we can provide each other value. You go in with that mindset of we're just going to try to be genuine representations of ourselves. And part of it too, and I've seen this come up in so many different conversations I've had on this podcast, is it's two parts. It's being accessible as individuals, so you want to show up and you want to be receptive to people and their thoughts, but also to be vulnerable, right? And to be able to share learnings and things that didn't work out, and kind of going back to that failure aspect, right? Like, this didn't work for me because XYZ, but I learned from it, right? And now I'm here to help somebody else who may be in a similar position, or seek help myself because I don't know where to go from here, to align with what you were sharing earlier. Any thoughts about that, Shahamat, before I move on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one thing I'll say, and this is something that people might find a shocker, but like, for example, there was a networking event this past Saturday that I had registered for. It was a free event. Don't kill me for this, but I ended up not going. And it wasn't because I didn't have time. It wasn't because of, there was other things I had to attend to. I was having imposter syndrome. Me, career coach Shahamat Chowdhury, 7,000 followers on LinkedIn. You'll see me speak in public and you're like, this guy has the most confidence in the world. Yes, I was having imposter syndrome. I was really nervous about, like, if I go there, how am I going to connect with people? Are people going to want to talk to me? If I'm feeling that way, there's a ton of people out there who are feeling the very same way. Networking events, people are like, you can just go in and talk to people. It's not that easy. I don't host too many networking events, but we did one very recently with this great organization here that helps Muslim professionals. They're called Oasis Hill in Virginia. Great guys. Their entire model is nonprofit. Like, they do not, everything that they make is invested back to the community. Like, they are doing such great things. What I love about them is that they're always looking to find inclusive things, whether it's vision boarding, whether it's a coaching seminar. But what I've noticed is I've attended some of those events and people come in and it's really tough for them to have a conversation. It's comforting when you go to a networking event and you at least know someone. But some of these folks, we don't have, it's not the easiest things from Muslims, but in general, just South Asian or people of minority groups to be able to make friends right away, right? Some of us just don't have that corporate conversation builder, being able to just have a chat. I'm someone, if you go in an elevator, I'll start talking to you, but not everyone can do that, right? I've had conversations with a lot of professionals and people in general who are like, yeah, I don't know how to, like, what do I say? How do I approach someone? How do I talk to someone without thinking that I want something from them? And so is because I think it's such an interesting concept where we have all these networking events, but what are we actually trying to provide people? Where is the actual community? Are we just saying like, hey, we had 600 people attend our networking event, but only 6 people actually got something out of it? Like, I think that's where, a lot of these places that are hosting these networking events, like, they're not really getting the big picture. Like, I think the big picture is like, can we actually create spaces and places where not only are we benefiting the attendees, but also the people hosting, right? We want to make sure that people are hosting, whether it's being hosted at a restaurant, coffee shop, whatever the case may be, are we amplifying that business? Are we growing that business? If someone's coming to a Salam Consulting networking event, I want them to be, if that's their first, networking event, I want them to be excited for the next one. If that is not the case, that means I've failed as someone, and I want to go back to failure. I failed as someone should create that sense of community. Like, if someone's not feeling that sense of community, that's a failure on my end. If someone comes and attends and they get a job application or a referral, like, that's cool and everything, but I want to make sure that people are getting that community built.
I want to double click on that aspect because this podcast and my own consulting work is dedicated to creating these learning communities at scale, right? And in many ways, it's almost like the community needs to conform to the, no two communities are going to be exactly the same, right? There's fundamental principles that all communities, I would say, have in common, but there are considerations that community builders have to keep in mind as they're nurturing, growing, scaling their communities. So when it comes to what you're building in the Salam community and your expanding network of clients and folks that you partner with, what are some of the ingredients? What are some of the key things that you strive to uphold when it comes to community building?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a couple things is the mutual benefit. That's a big thing, right? So, for example, the event we had with Oasis Hill, it was a vision boarding event. We had 35 people from all different backgrounds. We had someone who owned a shoe store. I met 2 lovely ladies who have their own Egyptian organization where people from Egypt or their families from Egypt come together and hang out in the DMV. Super cool. There was another individual who has their own run club, and basically they just have a really cool run club. So the reason why I'm mentioning these folks is because we're not really like, hey, you have to be a tech guy and come to this event, or you have to be in the healthcare space. No, you can be whoever you want. We're just going to talk about our visions. But what we did is we also had a coffee cart there, a small coffee cart. This was someone who had just started doing coffee cart business. This was one of her first events. We had folks pay a certain amount and then they bought coffee from her as well. And now that individual has gone on and done multiple coffee events. So what I'm saying is that all these different people need to have some type of benefit, right? It shouldn't just be one type of person, like only the attendees are going to benefit, or only the hosts are going to benefit. There has to be mutual benefit when you're looking at building an event, a community event, or just a space to build community, there has to be mutual benefit. There has to be some sort of connection to like, okay, what are we actually expecting people to do here? Are we expecting people just to sit and vision board and then not talk to each other? No, we want people to actually be able to connect. And one of the things I did when I was facilitating that event is my goal here from you all is everyone should exchange numbers with someone that they did not know before they got here. Do not sit next to your friends. Sit next to someone you've never met before. Have a conversation. Reach out to them later. Have a check-in. And there was so much healthy conversation. I remember we only had an hour and 30 for that session, and we went on for almost 2.5 hours because people were just so in sync with each other, and there was so much great discussion of like, oh, I see that on your vision board. Well, this is what I'm thinking. We did little breakout groups as well. I think the one thing that I've always struggled with a lot of these networking or community building events is you'll have a presentation for 45 minutes, and then they'll be like, hey, here's all my socials, that's it. You have to have interactive moments. If you're doing speed dating, social networking, or professional networking, like smaller groups. I've seen so many of these. I don't know if you have, Farhan, where it's just one large group talking and there's like two people talking. And that's it. Someone who might be an introvert or someone who's just like, observing the room. They're like, oh, well, I didn't get to talk to anyone. I just had to hear these two guys or these two girls go back and forth. You can't just host an event and expect people to show up and not have a lot of like moderation and delegation involved. So I think that's the big thing is like, how much can I control? If I'm inviting 50 people, can I control 50 people? If the case is no, then I don't need to have such a large event. I think so many times people are focused on these very large events, but they don't realize is like when things get too large. I mean, think about it like this, right? When you're in school, you have professors and so forth. We love the classes where you could have that face-to-face with, your professor, you could have the face-to-face with people around you. But if you're in a large lecture hall, you're not going to hear everyone's voice, right? It might be a great learning method for some folks, but someone like me, for example, I have to get one-on-one time with a professor. I have to get one-on-one time with smaller groups. So being able to instill that in community building opportunities is always necessary, or you're not going to be able to benefit, every single individual that's there.
I really love these insights, Shahamat, because as you were speaking, what came to mind for me was this idea of psychological safety, right? You can be the most seasoned speaker in the world, right? Just like what you were sharing earlier when you felt that sense of imposter syndrome. You can be the most seasoned person and you can be very affable. From personal experience, I was an introvert for a long time. I was kind of a selective extrovert, if I can call myself that. There are certain events and settings in which I couldn't get myself to be extroverted because it just wasn't my jam. I took a step back and assessed the situation and figured out when do I, put myself out there kind of thing, right? And many other events or many other types of events, I was a natural extrovert in. So I don't know the psychological backdrop to any of this, but there were enough times, especially when I was younger, when I felt I needed to push myself to be present and be kind of one of those people that's talking and interacting in these types of events, right? But the psychological safety piece is huge because when you're putting an event together and you're trying to make it interactive, that's a huge thing that I do in my work and just a fundamental pillar of pedagogy and impactful learning is you want to incorporate interactivity and action-based outcomes and things like that in your experiences. But I think that idea of psychological safety, kind of keeping, like you're putting an event together, you're going to give people value, not only the attendees, but the hosts, the partners, and the others that are involved, making it very holistic, right? I want people to feel safe here, right? And I want people to be themselves, right? A very hard thing to do, I think, in every type of event, depending on the attendees, the setting, and the venue. You may not be able to make everybody feel welcome, but that should be at least what you strive for, that people should be able to be themselves and share and learn in a judgment-free type of space. That resonates with me. The other piece, too, that I want to reflect on a little bit and get your thoughts on is I think it's also crucial to teach people how to network effectively and how to become vulnerable and accessible, approach failure. Because for me, and I think for many people, you never really learn these things in a didactic way. And I don't think you really can do it in a didactic way, but you kind of have to give yourself the room and the grace to fail in this endeavor on an individual level to be able to get to that point where you're like, yeah, you know what? I know how to engage when I need to, right? I know how to network and make connections in a way that serves me and the goals I am setting out to achieve. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. What part of this could be a teaching or learning exercise when it comes to providing people with the tools they need from a career standpoint or a community standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful concept. And I think facilitation is where that plays into factor. But one of the first Salam Consulting networking events we had was at a coffee shop in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, called Shotted. It's massive, right? The space is so massive. There's hundreds and hundreds of people always showing up there. We did it on a Saturday where we were able to get one like nice long table. There was like 16 of us, and I was like, okay, we're just gonna speed date. Everyone's just gonna talk, and then swap every like couple minutes. What we did is I knew as the host I could be there and just let people talk and call it a day. But there's a layer to that, right? There's an additional layer we have to think of, because if we're not thinking about others, right, when we're hosting these events, what is the purpose, right? I think that's always a big thing that people need to ask themselves. What am I truly doing by hosting these events? Like, if I'm calling myself a community builder, am I a community builder because I want, to get 600,000 followers on LinkedIn, or I want to increase my revenue in my business? If that's what your definition of a community builder is, you're not really a community builder. A community builder is someone who actually puts the community ahead of their own interests and needs. And that's what I always do when I'm having a community builder hat on, right? If I'm going out and making events that are free and for people to benefit from, what am I doing to facilitate those conversations? And so before we got there, we created bingo cards, and we were like, okay, here's a bingo card of all the different things that I want people to do. And it was like exchange a number, connect on LinkedIn, learn an interesting fact, meet someone who speaks 5 languages. We did that, and we were like, here, for people that might struggle, right? Because, I've been in that position before where I've gone to a networking event and I'm like, what do I ask these people? Or how do I, keep the conversation flowing? And so we gave that, but on top of that, there's another layer. The check. I don't know about you, Farhan, but I am not a fan of people that check in after events. Like, yes, please give out your exit surveys. That is important. But it's also very important to in the moment feedback. So I'm constantly, like, when we were having some breaks, I was like, hey, just tap on one of the people that are doing the networking event. I'm like, hey, how's it going? What do you like about this? What can I do to support you before we wrap up? What are some things we can shift around? Getting that in the moment feedback, I think, is so important. And obviously it's harder when you have larger scale events, but just being able to pick up on things in the moment can prevent anyone from having a very shitty situation or a shitty experience. Because once they leave that door, once they've left the event, you're accountable for their experiences. Whether or not you were the person that, was actually the reason why they had that issue, you're facilitating them. And there's a sense of responsibility that I have whenever people enter into an event that we're hosting, or even if our name's on it, that I feel like, okay, this person's happiness, this person's content, this person's fulfillment, that's my responsibility now. Even if that's not something they're going to tie to my name, it's more so that I just feel like I tie it to myself, because I'm like, okay, this is where I need to do whatever I can to make sure this person has a great time. So I would say, like, a big thing is being able to check in on people in the moment versus like, okay, we're just gonna, do a survey and maybe they'll give you feedback, maybe they won't. But Farhan, I know you've been there. People, you'll send out a survey. Not everyone's answering that survey.
Yeah, and I think in the moment feedback provides a treasure trove of insight. I struggle to capture that sometimes because maybe there's really good tools or strategies that somebody in that position can leverage when it comes to capturing that in the moment feedback or insight. A lot of it is anecdotal by design. You go around and check in on people. I remember one of the events that I co-hosted earlier this year, it was a very similar situation, or a long table, I should say, in a restaurant. And people kind of automatically gravitated into little groups because it was easier to just talk to the people around you. But then I actually made it my goal to visit each little group and check in with them and see how things were going. And some of it was introducing myself and cracking some jokes, just making people feel like they belonged, leveraging that vulnerability, being accessible, being empathetic, right? Encompassing all of that in this idea of like, okay, let's provide real value, right? Let's make this about others and not about me. I want to be there to serve and learn from the experience so that the next event is even better, more valuable, right? I see people coming back. That's another very easy metric to measure, not just the number of people showing up, but are the same people showing up? Are they hitting you up afterwards saying, hey, you know what? I really liked the event. Next time, could we do something a little bit different, right? Or could we do X, Y, Z? That feedback is also incredibly important and empowering, right? Yeah. As we get closer to the end of the episode, Shahamat, even though I feel like we could talk for many more hours, I'd love to hear one of the things that I'm trying to do now in the new season of the podcast is ask my guests if they could choose one word that summarizes the work that they do, what they're passionate about, what they want our listeners to be able to walk away with. What would that word be in your case?
This is an interesting one. It's family. And here's why. At Salam, in general, I want people to be treated like family, right? Whether that's you're a client who's had 6, 7 sessions with us, whether you're someone that only did a discovery call for 15 minutes or someone who just met us at an event. I want, when people think about how Salam treated them during their journey, how we treated them at an elevator, whatever the case may be, we want folks to really be like, okay, that's like, I feel like so at home, like this person, this stranger, did so much care for me. And I think, I don't want to boast, but I feel like we've already been invited to a couple of clients' weddings, and we've been around for only a couple months. So I've been invited to a couple weddings. I've had clients refer me to their family members, to their parents, to their spouses. So we're already seeing, when you are nice to someone, Farhan, I'm telling you, that's all you need to do. Let me ask you something. What is your favorite restaurant?
Actually, you'll find this funny. There's a place called Shamshir in Tyson's Corner. It was one of the restaurants I went to a long time ago, but I really enjoy it. I have great memories.
So what do you love most about it? Like, what was the reason why that's your favorite?
It was such an inviting atmosphere, right? I mean, I almost feel like when it comes to going out and being with people, the ambiance is even more important than the taste of the food, even though I remember the food was pretty good too, right?
Yeah.
But it's what you remember is how you feel, right? How you were treated. That restaurant has really good memories in that
Yeah.
domain.
So that's exactly it, right? You said the food was nice, but you talked about the invitingness and how it made you feel. And that's what matters most to me. I'd rather go to a really nice restaurant, a place that's very fancy, or a place where it's going to be a lot more expensive, but the quality of the service is great, versus some place where maybe the food is much better, but the quality is just, they don't care about you, right? And I think that applies in everywhere, whether it's consulting, whether it's, coaching. You have to treat people at the highest level. Like, and Salam is very a white glove service, right? We are constantly texting people, we're constantly updating people, we are constantly checking in with folks. But that's by design, right? Most coaches are not going to do that. I would actually say 99% of coaches are not doing that for free, right? They're going to be like, oh, you want to talk to me? Here's a $50 a session we have to book. Or, hey, you want to chat for a couple minutes? $15, right? I feel like the issue with coaching, the core issue with coaching, I was talking to an imam at my masjid. He was talking about how coaching has become so predatory. And it's an interesting concept, and we could talk about this for hours, but the concept that people that are, a lot of coaches kind of look at your opportunities, your insecurities, and they monetize it. They're like, okay, Farhan, you don't feel good about your interviewing skills? Here's a 6-week interview program that we can do. Oh, you don't feel confident about how your life is going? Let's do life coaching for $7,000, right? You do this, you'll feel much better. Oh, you think you've lost your connection to Islam? Let's have this coaching seminar together, right? I don't want that to be the model here at Salam. If you're feeling bad, like I've had a couple people reach out to me like, hey, I really want life coaching. I'll pay you whatever I want. I'm like, no, that's not what we're going to do here. Like, you can pay me this small fee and we'll talk for a couple minutes. But what I'm not going to do is allow your insecurities to pull in. I think that's why we're really trying to break out of this coaching ecosystem where insecurities are highlighted the most, and really just bring in like hey, I'm here as a family member. I'm here as a friend. Yes, you might be paying me something, but I'm going to do more than what you're just paying me to make sure that you're feeling that sense of belonging and that invitation to continuously come back and get what you need and what you're calling for.
I think it's a very refreshing take, right? One that we don't hear about that much. So much of what we see on a day-to-day basis just being completely inundated with, you know, offers to sign up for stuff and pay people money to get something of value in return. Of course, there's something to be said for that, but there's also something equally, if not more important, about these connections that don't have that price tag attached, and these experiences that are really very wholesome and genuine, which in my experience, just having been a solopreneur now for almost a year, some of the most impactful, life-changing, some of the most significant inflection points for me have been these serendipitous encounters. Somebody I met at a conference who I later chatted with, and over the course of the conversations, got insights into different aspects of what I was building. I sometimes question, I could have signed up with an entrepreneurial coach who could have framed that relationship from the get-go as, yeah, I'm going to help you build these competencies in XYZ. It would have been a different relationship from the very beginning if it was with somebody in that domain, as opposed to this type of organic growth and discovery that I'm doing with people that I genuinely just enjoy speaking with, right? So there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add here is another goal of Salam, right? We want to get to the point where people don't need coaches. Our community will be so invested in everyone else's development that everyone will just be able to one day, because everyone else has become a coach. I would see that as success. Put me out of business. That means everyone's figured it out. Unfortunately, we're not there yet, but you could have just got a coach and paid him thousands of dollars to help out with your ventures. But instead, you're taking what the community is building and bringing it together, which I think, A, saving money, but B, you're learning organically and making organic relationships.
What an awesome note to end on, Shahamat. Where can our listeners and viewers find you and your work? I'm definitely going to add the website and the LinkedIn, but what other ideas come to mind, or what's your preferred method?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm the only Shahamat Chowdhury, I think, in the United States, so it should be easy to find me. You can find us on Salam Consulting's website, and then as well as our Instagram page, Salam Consulting _. But I think other than that, like, please would love to have these listeners come to we're hoping to get some virtual events going, some master classes. A lot of free things are coming in the works for Salam this summer. So really excited to see what we can build together.
It was amazing having you on, Shahamat. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.